Amazing. Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for your patience as we get started here. I'm here today. My name is Ari Bornstein. I'm based in Tel Aviv, and I work with Microsoft's cloud advocacy team on the AI side of things. I'm here today to try to answer as many of your questions as I can. We'll open up to kind of Q&A. So as you type in the chat, I'll go through each of the pieces of the chat. And if I can help and provide resources, I'm happy to do that. So let's get started here. I see that the first question that I'm seeing in the chat on my side here is I want to be able to do natural language mining of a bunch of procedural documents, which have standard operational procedures. They share similar word structures, but in different formats like Word, PDF, and text. Is there a good way to get them into a base format for natural language processing services? So it's an extremely good question. One of the ways that I would recommend doing this is actually trying to there are a couple different ways. So one is the documents that you can standardize in a traditional sense where it's in plain text and you can format and take that out. I would try to extract the text and process it that way. And for the other ones where you have PDFs or Word documents where they're not text, what I would look at is the form recognizer service, which is, and the Microsoft Cognitive Service for OCR, which can help you try to process that data into something that can be then processed by the other natural language processing services. So we'll put it in a format in JSON where you have natural text that then can be inputted and converted into whatever we process with text analytics, or additionally, it can be processed with other frameworks as well. So let's open up to more questions. If you type questions in the chat, I'll be able to answer them. And if you want, I can also give a general overview of some of our machine learning offerings as well. Well, while I'm waiting for questions, let's do that. I'm gonna try to share out my screen here. Perfect. So let's see, we're getting some questions in here right now. Let's take a look. It was nice to see a CI/CD template for managing and creating Lewis projects from ADO. Is there a plan to do the same thing for Q&A Maker? So in terms of a plan to do that for Q&A Maker, I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know that there are some templates for ARM templates for Q&A Maker. And what I can do here is sorry again if you can see my hands, but I'll pull up some. And I will put that in the chat for you guys. So I'll mark that and I'll come back and I'll put some more stuff in the chat as we go along. Let's see, additional thing. Here's a really good question. What are you most excited about in AI and machine learning? So for me, I think one of the really exciting things that we're seeing is greater accessibility into the field. So there's a couple main trends going on around democratization of AI. And I think what's really nice is it used to be that, and I still think it's critically important to understand fundamentally how a lot of the models work, but I think the publication cycle to open source and a lot of the amazing stuff going around Power Apps and automated ML that allow you to get started, to dip your toes in and really be able to go and take your learning to the next step. Yesterday, for example, we had a really cool, Microsoft announced a really cool collaboration with Hugging Face, which is, they provide one of the standard natural language processing frameworks for doing state-of-the-art models for transformer networks. And we partnered with them to bring a lot of the work that they're doing and connect it with the Onyx runtime, which leads to both a speed up for evaluation and on the edge evaluation and training, and being able to see those types of things quickly iterating in a way that we can take research that's on the cutting edge and make it more production worthy it really, really gets me excited. So let's see. Yeah, okay, so another really great one. My team is interested in using AI ML for large spatial data sets, satellite imagery for natural resource applications. Yes, so is there anything that I would do to get started here? And yes, so actually, and I'm trying to, let's see if I can find a case study for you. We actually have some really cool case studies on Azure using some of the computer vision tooling around object detection and object segmentation for being able to process satellite imagery. So let me see if I can pull something up for you here, and I will comment on that. Azure case study, object detection, satellite. And as I'm pulling that stuff up, I'll take more questions. So as we come in. So all right, let's see. I wish we could have a CI/CD template for custom vision. I think there is one. So again, I will make an effort here to send out afterwards or send in the comments a links to it. But I'm pretty sure if we look at the CI/CD for custom vision and ARM, I've used one in the past, so I know it exists. And I will try to integrate that for you guys. All right, let's see. Here's another really good one. Whenever our new papers are published in the deep learning area, how do you focus on which papers can be used for industrial applications versus papers that apply to specific scenarios? So I think that's a really, really good question. One of the ways that I try to keep up to date with a lot of this work is some of it is through following some of the different research institutions in the field that that has applications in the area. So for instance, if I'm trying to do something with computer vision on satellite imagery, or I want to do something in natural language processing, following some of the top labs, MSR, but also let's say like the Stanford lab, BIU NLP, a couple of these different labs on Twitter, I see then they publish a lot of interesting articles that way, so I can discover a lot that way. Additionally, there are a lot of really cool resources. There's the awesome papers GitHub, which shows like every time there's really cool new AI machine learning article, it gets published and added to that repo. And there's also papers with code, which segments a lot of the really cool articles and research with actual code examples. So you can actually then evaluate beyond just whether the model that's being published for a specific scenario that might be relevant for you has an industry application, and whether the code base is actually something that can be turned into a production code base. Here's another good one. Do you think tools such as AutoML will kill traditional ML jobs? So I hear that there's often a lot of fear when we talk about, democratization of AI, especially in the machine learning space. I personally don't believe applications like AutoML will take away the data science or augment out the data science or the ML role. I think actually, on the contrary, what these frameworks allow you to do is they help you get to your baseline more quickly. So often when I'm doing scoping or working with a customer or working with a partner on create or a community member on scoping out a new AI or machine learning process, one of the challenges that we have is often people take their data, they go to scikit-learn, they go to TensorFlow, they go to Keras, they might search on GitHub, and they try to get, train a model as fast as possible, but they don't necessarily have a nice benchmark to compare the data to on their model. So they don't necessarily know, do they really need the state-of-the-art model for their application? Do they really, is the state of the art properly configured to actually be giving great performance? And where I think the AutoML does is, instead of replacing the data scientist or the ML engineer, I think it augments them. It provides them with the ability to quickly get that baseline, so then you know what to do and how to invest to get to that next step. So, all right, let's see. I'd like to have a machine learning voice assistant for my app. How would I go about making it recognize your voice and only responding to that? How could it learn preferences? So this is actually a really a really good question. I'll publish this. So there's actually in the custom vision in the cognitive services, there's a custom voice service that you can use to actually train. It has a baseline model that you can use the service to augment with your own voice samples, and then you can use that to get voice commands out of that. And so I would definitely recommend looking at the documentation for the Azure Cognitive Services for custom voice. So, okay, here's another, let's see, let's look. Here's another really good one. Do you have any recommendations for websites to actually study machine learning? So actually I do. I think there are a couple really good ones. So first and foremost, what I would do is if you look at places like Towards Data Science on Medium, a good place to get started. Also, like there's so many really good resources online. We have our Microsoft Learn modules that I've actually written a couple of those that walk you through how to get started in with the basics of machine learning, also with deep learning, computer vision, and natural language processing as well. And there's more really cool content coming out there soon. Additionally, what I'd recommend is checking out Udacity. And my other big recommendation there too is every single top university that it is offering right now top classes in machine learning or deep learning, they also make a lot of this content available online, accessible in YouTube and on their syllabuses. So what I always recommend is go to the Stanford, go to the MIT, go to the different websites for these schools, look at the CS 221 or 229 for the different machine learning courses. And I think they're amazing resources to get started. Do you share these links? Yes, absolutely. As I get to the end of the post, what I'll do is I'll publish out all the links. My challenge right now is because we're live, I don't want to be typing while I'm taking in questions, but I will go and I will publish it. And so when you get into this feed or after the feed, you'll see all the links for all the questions, and I'll make sure that that gets out to you. Okay, here's a really good question. I'm a C# developer at heart who's had to embrace Python due to its machine learning data science capabilities. Are you aware of any plans around improving F# or C# for this kind of work? So there actually is a lot of efforts around ML.NET, for example. That being said, I would caution. There's, one of the reasons that I do think that Python is the right framework when we're dealing with, again, I think in data science you have a lot more options, but in machine learning specifically, is because of the community that's developing on the state of the art for Python, whether those are packages like NLTK, Spacey, OpenCV, PyTorch, TensorFlow, Keras, a lot of these pandas, all of these frameworks being natively supported in Python, and also a lot of in academia where we're seeing a lot of in industry where we're seeing a lot of a lot of these new advancements in articles, because a lot of that code is now shifted from a period where it was all in MATLAB and C and C++ to Python. I really think it's good to get started there. That being said, one of the things that I would really suggest, if you are a C# developer, or you are an F# developer, or even other frameworks as well, keep an eye out on the work that's being done with the Onyx runtime. Because what I'm hoping is that as we go forward, you'll have your ML engineer that works and develops and designs these models in Python. But when you actually go and take it and go into production, you'll be able to actually leverage the models in the language of your choice. And again, I don't think that's 100% there right now, but I do think that we're getting there. And actually, if you want to search online, I wrote a post about this, about how to evaluate the same model in 10 different languages using the Onyx framework. That ability to have like that inferencing layer in the different languages, I do think that that will bring things together. Because today, that's the real challenge is, you know, even if I can run a baseline model in C# or get a framework, you know, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to leverage what the community is developing. So, okay, what's the best place to get started learning about cloud AI and machine learning? Okay, well, I'm going to give a little plug for myself. Follow me on Twitter at PythicCoder. But to be more serious and more ingrained on that, there's a couple really cool areas that you can get started. One is Microsoft Learn. We have a whole track for AI, cloud AI content. It's really, really good. And another area that I would other place that I would strongly recommend looking at, and actually we just put out a ton of posts in the last month, something like 40 new posts, is the Azure Medium blog. There, pretty much every week, I'm working to try to put out a new piece of content on how to leverage cloud and AI. There's a really nice, and I'll post a link to it in the end, but there's a really nice post that I put together called 9 Tips for Production Machine Learning, which really walks you through the different steps of machine learning and AI on the cloud. So that's what I would say. All right, here's a little bit of a more personal question. I'm happy to answer that. What does my typical day look like? So that's a really good question. As a developer advocate, my day, there really is no direct day-to-day, but I like to break my role up into 3 different phases. One is doing like Q&As and trying to interact with the community and doing sessions like this. So you'll catch me here at Build a lot, at Build and a couple other sessions, but also in other frameworks, other community spaces as well. The other areas, I like to write a lot of content. So I really believe that, especially in the AI machine learning space, it's not enough to just talk at a meetup. You really need to, if you want to be part of this community, you should be contributing, developing it. So I try to write code. I try to support our open source partners and document that as well. And the last part of that is taking a lot of the feedbacks and the interactions and, you know, a lot of these pain points that I'm seeing here, and trying then, I sit with the product teams and I try to make sure that we address these things so that we can provide an offering that really unblocks you, our customers, and our partners. Okay, here's one. I want to analyze customer complaints. Do I need to train my ML model to do that, or can I just use out-of-the-box AI capabilities? So this is a really good one. At Microsoft Ignite last year, I gave a really nice talk about this, and I definitely recommend looking it up. So what I like to say, this actually transcends just a question about when to use, you know, build my own model and when to use out-of-the-box model. I like to say that there's an 80-20 rule. They're called Pareto optimum. And we have a lot in computer science. One of my favorite ones is that, you know, 20% of our code is responsible for 80% of our bugs. Well, when it comes to machine learning and cloud AI, I also believe that there's another one, which is about 80% of the scenarios that you want to develop, you can probably put them together with the out-of-box AI. For example, if you wanted to deal with understanding customer sentiment, you could take a sentiment analysis model, or you could use an emotion recognition model. We have a lot of them out of the box supported great models. But then, you know, there's those scenarios, those additional 20% that you really need to differentiate. And that's when you really do need the power of like the Azure machine learning framework, when you want to really get for that additional 20% scenarios that aren't covered by the out of the box. And what I would say, what's interesting about those 20% is those 20% tend to also have, in experience the 80% most business value. So what I recommend is if you have a solution and you can get a MVP, you know, the minimum viable product or something that's working that you can demonstrate that has business value with the cloud AI, out of the box cognitive service solutions, I always recommend to start there because they're constantly iterated, they're supported, there's a framework, there's a community out of there. And even if there are a couple of features, for example, that you don't necessarily have at the moment, it's very likely that they'll be added in the future as these services are maintained versus you having to manage that all yourself. That being said, that also then frees you up to focus on those 20% super impactful business scenarios where you do need something more custom, and that's where you should focus your data science and machine learning efforts. Okay, let's see. Jason P is asking, does Microsoft provide ML training data, images of faces, maps, text strings, or other custom data that can be requested by someone prototyping a ML application? So there actually is a resource, and again, I'll post a link to it at the end here, of open datasets at Microsoft that have been put together by our Microsoft research team. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I put together an NLP challenge called the Math Teacher Challenge, which was a full data set of how to take math word problems and try to extract out the solutions from them using sequence to sequence models. And yes, I would absolutely recommend you check out that resource. I'll put links at the end. I'll compile the whole thing. And what I would recommend is I also, on the Azure Medium blog, so if you go to any search engine and you search Azure Medium, what I will also be doing after this post is I'll be going through all these questions. I'll try to make an FAQ, and I'll put all the resources there as well. So if you keep an eye out on the Azure Medium blog, you should be able to see all the links there as well for everything that I'm talking about. So, okay, here's a really good question. What to use on Azure for ML ops? Azure ML, Azure Databricks ML flow, model registry, run ML flow on my own VM. This is a really good question. It's actually something that I've been thinking about a lot recently in terms of putting together some reference architectures for this. I view it kind of, I like to draw a line down the middle. So typically, if I'm using Spark ML or I'm using that, I'm already in the Spark ecosystem and I have some sort of solution there, then we provide the ability to do that ML ops within that ecosystem that you're familiar with for Spark ML. But what I would caveat is that the support in terms of a lot of the trends and things that are going on, cutting edge models and frameworks, things like Hugging Face, Spacey, PyTorch, versions of TensorFlow, even though there is a Spark flow, a lot of these frameworks, the cutting edge support isn't necessarily in the Spark ecosystem. So what I typically recommend is to use the Databricks, use the Spark ecosystem for your data processing, to get your data sets, to get your data ingress, to clean up your data. And then once you have that data, that's when you would transition over to the Azure ML side of things. And that's where you can go and experiment and leverage all the most popular open source frameworks. You leverage all the power of distributed compute, batch compute with just one line of code. And again, I have posts on that recommend you check them out on the Azure Medium. And also all the model management and interpretability and all these really nice tools that don't come necessarily out of the box in the native Databricks Spark ML ecosystem. So will you open source various data sets for text, images, speech, especially underrepresented languages? So this is a really good question. I would say as a company, Microsoft and MSR, they're putting out new data sets all the time. So I definitely keep an eye open on it. The other thing I would recommend is there are so many really amazing research institutions that are putting out new data sets in this space all the time. There's actually, and I'll put a link to it as well, there's some really cool, like amazing data set repos in GitHub, and also especially in the cross multilingual space. as someone who works in a natural language processing lab where the native language is not English, I'm very partial to what they call Bender's law, where it's not just enough that we focused on English. It's really important that we are, if we want to be more accessible and we really want to democratize the advancements of AI, that we're also focusing on the challenges of other languages as well, especially when we deal with challenges of the fact that other languages have different constraints, such as morphology, that you don't necessarily have in English. All right, let's look at a couple more here. Yes, all right, please also share your Twitter handle, so and the blog you mentioned in your reply. So absolutely. So what I'm gonna do here is let me go in and I will add my Twitter handle in the published area here in the announcements as well. Also the Azure Medium. And what I will do is, again, I will be putting a post together, cataloging essentially an FAQ for all the questions here, even the ones I haven't seen, so that I can get good, solid, documented answers for you. And also when I'm done, if you saw where I put the my Twitter handle here, I also will, at the end of this call, be making an announcement and putting all the links after we go offline so that we can deal with this stuff as well. Okay, amazing. So I have another question around a general overview for Azure Machine Learning. What I would recommend, again, I'll put links to that. There's going to be another session there are going to be a lot of sessions here in Microsoft Build that I would take a look at, that will be going through everything, and everything's recorded and available even afterwards. So I don't want to, I want to be more focused on people's questions as opposed to doing a general overview. But if you are interested in a general overview, please keep an eye on the stuff that I'm putting out, and I'll make sure to make sure that we have something like that. All right. So, okay, here's an interesting question here. I have some questions about Azure ML. Is it based on open source ML flow lib? What are best practices? Is it separated for workspaces? Azure Databricks has ML flow included. What to use on Azure, DBX model registry or Azure ML? So again, this goes back a little bit into what I spoke about earlier. So Azure ML is very different than the Databricks pipeline. Again, there is some overlap in terms of their capabilities, as the Databricks uses, again, the Spark ecosystem, whereas the Azure ML is a separate service that allows you to take advantage of things like distributed compute, automated ML on your data, a lot of really nice features of interpretability, scalable deployment, and being able to deploy directly to AKS. Also some really nice additional features as well. I'll put some additional links on that, and in the future, I'll also focus on trying to put out content as a developer advocate to better differentiate what the two offerings are. So, okay, can you or a moderator provide a link to AI ML case studies? My team is also interested in AI ML advanced heuristics so for solving NP-complete problems. I will be happy to put out, I'm not an expert on NP-complete problems, but I will be happy to add links to these services, to some of our case studies as well. Here's a really nice question. What cool ML AI work have you seen regarding COVID? So there's actually a lot of it going on. Some really, really nice work in terms of being, so there are a lot of different ways that people have been using AI ML in contact tracing. I don't want to focus too much on that. There's also a lot of really interesting work in terms of using AI ML and a lot of the advances in computer vision for being able to better diagnose and better CT scans to see whether there's detection there. I saw some really interesting work about trying to do cough detection and diagnosis. And Again, I'm not a doctor or anything, and I don't have as much experience in that field, but I do know that there's a lot of really interesting work going on. It's focusing on trying to be able to better detect and better diagnose the overall situation of COVID, and also to keep people safe. I'll put some case studies afterwards in the thread. So, okay, let's keep going here. Here's a good one. For both speech synthesis and text generation, do you have any good methodology or data set in training models to have a specific personality or set of emotions? So in terms of specific personality or set of emotions, my understanding is it's still, there's some work in this, but it's still an open research field. This isn't something that has been fully solved. That being said, that there's been a lot of work being done in terms of having more natural sounding text to speech generation. And I'll put some links to some of the open source models that have come out over the past couple months for state of the art there at the end. Do you have any solutions? Here's a really good one. To help with scarcity of initial data, especially with computer vision and speech synthesis. So absolutely, I think this is a really interesting area, and one of the things is taking advantage of transfer learning and pre-training and a lot of the advances that are going on in that space. Another thing is looking at and I'll provide links afterwards, looking at open data sets and see how they can overlap with your domain. And the other area is also data augmentation as well. So I'll put some links there. I've done a lot of really interesting work in there, especially in the computer vision space. There's been a lot of interesting work in terms of how do we do data augmentation and data simulation in a way that we can provide, transfer some of the insights that we get from simulated data into a real domain space, while also making sure that we don't unintentionally add unintended bias into our models. And I'll provide some resources into there as well. Okay, let's see. So in a second, let's take a look at some more questions. For quality analysts, quality engineers that are new to machine learning, where would you recommend starting when learning how to validate models or the impact of applied models? That's a really, really good question. What I would start with, so I wrote some interesting posts on this as well. If you check out the Azure Medium in my blog, I'd start there, but I also would recommend looking at Microsoft Learn. And there's also this week they announced some really cool new packages from the Microsoft AI Fairness team that are trying to provide better and more granular tools for model interpretability. So from a quality engineering perspective, if I was interested in how do I deal with the space of model interpretability, which is really new, I would check out those packages. And we just published a new article on the Azure Medium blog today that walks through a lot of the really cool stuff here. And there's also my coworker Francesca is going to be giving a session a little bit later, so I would keep an eye out on that as well. Okay, let's see here. Can Microsoft use my trained model, include it into their pre-built model? That I don't necessarily know. So I'm not going to address that one directly. If you have additional questions, follow up with me on Twitter, and I'll see what I can do to give you a more in-depth response. Let's see what. A lot of interesting questions about MLNet release cycle. Again, the main information that I would give you is keep an eye out on the MLNet blogs, on the MLNet announcements. I know a lot of really cool work is happening there, but I don't have direct insight into exactly what the roadmap for that's going to be right now. Here's a really interesting question. What's the most emerging area in deep learning according to you? Text or image or vision? Would you recommend for somebody trying to break into data science and machine learning? So first of all, I think what's really cool about the AI and machine learning space is actually how much of an impact we're having across a lot of these different domains, whether that's computer vision or natural language processing. I personally am really excited by a lot of the developments in natural language processing, not just these large state-of-the-art transformer models that have really driven and provided state-of-the-art benchmarks, but also a lot of the really interesting questions that are getting starting to be asked around interpretability, and also the advances that we're making in trying to, and again, it's still open research fields, but trying to better understand how semantic information is expressed and can be structured, and how we can use that to provide better insight. I actually did a really interesting series that I definitely called Beyond Word Embeddings that I definitely suggest checking out if you're interested in that. I also think the computer vision domain is really, really cool, especially the stuff that's going on in the 3D modeling space and the 3D model generation. Really, really cool stuff. And what I recommend is, before choosing a narrow domain to focus, because there are a lot of areas, is to just play around, get started with the top level, try to understand, go to the cognitive services and play around with a couple different cognitive services, go to papers with code and looking at the different scenarios and benchmarks. There are a lot of really cool things there. And then afterwards, when something catches your eye, that's what I would recommend. Then go and dive a little deeper. Okay, here's an interesting question. According to you, which domain or domain knowledge according to you, which domain is domain knowledge more important for data or ML scientists? So what I would say is it's domain knowledge is really important for any scenario that you're implementing. I think one of the challenges that we often see in the machine learning or machine engineering space is, there's that old adage that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And often, we go into a lot of spaces with, state-of-the-art machine learning models, train the data, we get these really good models, and we put them into production, and we realize that we solved a parallel task, or that there's something that we didn't fully understand. I personally believe with the democratization of AI and machine learning, what's really going to differentiate us in the end of the day is our domain knowledge. And that's why I think things are going to be really, really amazing going forward. Okay, let's see a couple more questions here. Is there any shortcut for identifying a model against a particular problem without doing extensive research on the data? I mean, identifying a model by identifying certain keywords from the problem. Is there any cheat sheet for a quick start? So actually, going back to the conversation that we had earlier, this is where I think really AutoML really comes into play. Because what AutoML will do is you take your data, if you have a classification task where you want to classify something into a set group, or if you have a regression task where you want to try to predict a value in the future, you just define, or you have any other sort of task like that, you define exactly the task that you want to do, you define what you want to classify or what you want to predict, you upload it to the AutoML tool, and what's nice there is that gives you a very strong baseline that you can then go and build on top of. So what that will do is that will try a bunch of different model architectures. If it sees certain model, it also has early stopping policies. So if it sees that a model is not converging or that it's just wasting your compute cycles, it will kill that model and invest the compute cycles in another architectural approach. Also in AutoML, and it transcends just the offering of AutoML, but in the AutoML space, there's also a lot of work going on in seeing there are a couple different techniques. One is the technique that I outlined about trying out a bunch of the different models and seeing what converges and what doesn't. Another really, really cool, interesting technique is looking at how do we structure a lot of the insights that's happening in the academia and in the research space, and trying to use that embedding data or metadata to learn a little bit more about our problems. And there's some really, really cool open source research there. And I'll try to provide some links afterwards about the different kinds of AutoML and how you can use them to get started and try to learn and understand a little bit more about your data. I'm seeing a lot of questions about how can I transition into an AI or ML career. It seems like a lot of the work is done by mid-level or senior level engineers. I wouldn't get discouraged by this. I think that there's a lot of areas for different levels and also junior machine learning engineers as well. My straight up recommendation to anybody when it comes to getting started is to build. Come up with a project, come up with something that you're passionate about or that you've always wanted to do, and then look at these online research resources, and as you're taking the classes and you're learning things, be in the back of your mind thinking about the thing that you want to build. And what's really nice about that is I find for me personally, when I'm building out demos or I'm trying to learn a new skill by having a cool application or project, as I'm learning the new skill, it sticks more because I'm thinking cognitively about, oh, that's really cool. Maybe if I try this, I can do something really cool in my own project, as opposed to just watching somebody do something that it's not directly related to me. Okay, here's a really good question. Do you have some insights to the Azure ML data labeling tool? Can there be included instance segmentation for object detection, or for instance segmentation for object detection for some fancy semi-auto labeling methods? So actually, this is a really, really good question. First of all, if you're doing object detection or you want to do some active learning, there's two resources I recommend get started with. One is the Azure Custom Vision Service, which you can search online, and I'll provide a link to. There, it enables you to put in your bounding boxes, train a model, get something that you can very quickly export to all your favorite edge frameworks, whether that's in Docker, the Vision Toolkit, or even TensorFlow, TensorFlow.js, CoreML on your iOS devices. And it also has the feature that after you've trained a model, you can use that model to tag other images as well and then update them. If you're looking for a more open source solution, there's also the visual object tagging tool. I will give a disclaimer. I was one of the original developers for this tool, but what's really cool about the tool is it's completely open source, runs cross-platform. There's a web version that you can deploy and use on Azure as well that integrates with blob storage. You can annotate, you can do segmentation annotation for instance segmentation. You do annotation for object detection. You can integrate your own models. It works on videos. It works on images. It has integration into the Bing Search API, so you can even use it to generate your own data sets and then annotate those. And it has the ability to export models already out of the box in the formats that are used, like Pascal VOC or TF records that are used by the traditional APIs like Detectron or the TensorFlow computer vision API. So that's VOT. You can find it just by searching Microsoft VOT. Definitely recommend taking a look at that as well. Let's see. So there are a lot of questions again about MLNet, .NET. I will, afterwards, I'll post some resources because they're more in-depth technical questions, and I don't want to spend a lot of the time here going into the depth part, but I will definitely provide resources on those. Here's a really good question. how much experience do you have with deploying deep learning models on IoT hardware devices, and which product utilizes this the best right now? So again, this is actually really, really cool. Especially this week, we've announced a lot of really cool updates to the Onyx runtime, which again is one of the really cool things that they announced is that the Onyx team worked directly with Intel and with NVIDIA to provide additional performance boosts at the chipset level for models in the Onyx format or that are being evaluated by the Onyx runtime. In terms of running on the edge, there are a couple really interesting resources for that. I'll provide documentation afterwards. In terms of a product or a Microsoft product that does that extremely well, again, that I would take a look at the Custom Vision service where you can annotate your data, put images in different folders, or you can put bounding box against images, click a button, train it, and then you can export the model into pretty much any edge framework that you want, whether that's in a Docker container, whether that's in TensorFlow.js or TensorFlow Lite for Android, whether that's in Core ML for iOS. And again, I think this is an area that it's still developing, but we're seeing a lot of progress, a lot of extremely fast in terms of on the edge inferencing. And if you compare where we are today to just a couple short years ago, it's pretty incredible. And I'll be happy to provide some nice stuff, documentation for that at the end. Are we not having an ML-assisted labeling tool already? Why still VOT? So again, the reason I said VOT is it's just one option. It's an open source option. That's the only reason I brought it up. There are out-of-the-box labeling tools in the Azure ML service. They provide labeling tools that you can look at, and they actually do provide support. I don't know right now. I don't believe that they provide support for instance segmentation yet, but I know that things are developing every day. I also, again, these things are changing every day and are getting better all the time. And if you don't want to use some of the open source tooling and you want to use out-of-the-box supported tooling, I strongly recommend do it. There's nothing stopping you. All right. So the last one is we're over time. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to end things now since we're over time. I'm going to do two things. Is here at the end, I am going to put a link to my Azure Medium, or to my personal Medium, where I'm going to take all these questions that I didn't get a chance, that I answered and that I didn't get a chance to answer. And I will later today be putting, I will be putting together a post with resources and documentation and FAQ style for each of the questions that you guys took the time to ask me today. If there's any additional questions that I didn't get to, that you would like me to get to, what I recommend is write them now and or tweet them at me at PithicCoder, and I will add them to the post that I draft. And I'm going to get started on that post literally the second I disconnect from the stream. So this is the Medium. And again, this is my Twitter handle at PithicCoder. I really, again, want to thank everybody who came today, and I look forward to answering all your questions.